If you do want to participate in a dialogue or you want to go ahead and ask a question, we can go ahead and unmute you, and you can unmute yourself and notify us by raising your hand by clicking that hand icon in the go-to panel. If you don't want to participate in an open dialogue, feel free to type in your question in the question section of the go-to panel, and we will go over those questions at the end of the presentation as well. Please remember to keep your questions generic throughout the presentation, but if you do have a specific question about a specific project, feel free to email us at oshpd.fddisu@oshpod.ca.gov. Again, that's oshpd.fddisu@oshpod.ca.gov. If we experience transmission difficulties, we will go ahead and log out and we'll log back in using the same login information that the go-to panel sent us, and we hope that you do the same. So if you have problems with the audio or the visual, feel free to log off and log back in, and hopefully that takes care of the issue. Today for presenters, we have Mr. Joe Labrie. He is the Inspection Services Unit Regional Compliance Officer. And in the background, answering questions, we have the ISU team as well. So Joe, if you're there, the presentation is all yours.
Yeah, I'm here. Great. Thank you, Caesar. Appreciate that. And welcome, everybody. We're happy that you could all join us for today's conversation, discussion, and brief on VCRs. There seems to be a plethora of questions that come up on this on a pretty regular basis. And so it is our hope that by going through this and by you having a document that you can download from the GoToMeeting, as Caesar mentioned, it'll give some guidance on the technicalities of this. So we're going to cover these items. What are the VCRs? Why are the VCRs important? And that's a verified compliance report. How should the VCRs be done? Who must complete the VCRs, and who collects and submits the VCRs to OSHPD? On the right, you can see that form. Very top section A and F. That's your name. It's the address. It's all the stuff you have a slam dunk. The stuff I really want to zero in on is that middle portion. That middle portion, that's section C, D, and E, is so important. In particular, section C, observed elements of construction. So often we see VCRs that come in and this part is left blank or very, 3-word sentences. Yeah, kind of, I was there, I walked the site, something really cursory. And we really, this is the meat and potatoes. We wanted to know what you observed while you were looking at this portion of the work. The second part, that middle section, talks about what is probably going to be the most important phrase you hear today: reasonable diligence to obtain personal knowledge. And that is based on statute, the law that says who is supposed to have personal knowledge for what part of the work and how that's obtained. And that last section E gives you the details of the observations, any exceptions, issues, photos. This is a one-page form, but nothing keeps you from adding pages as needed if you want to document photos of your own observations. So, what are verified compliance reports? These are documents identified in the test, inspection, and observation program for the ongoing, and I've highlighted that intentionally, it's ongoing confirmation and verification that the construction complies with the OSHPD approved plans. Why are VCRs important? Well, the Health and Safety Code requires that they be submitted. It's important for the quality assurance of your project and the verification of construction based on reasonable diligence to obtain personal knowledge. How should VCRs be done? And again, I'm going to beat you up with these words, this phrase right here, using reasonable diligence to obtain personal knowledge. So critical. Reasonable diligence starts with good communication. The designers, the delegates, the alternates, contractor, the owner, the IOR, the inspectors, just an integrated project team having conversations about the project and what constitutes the appropriate effort to verify the personal knowledge component. It also requires this job site visit, believe it or not. There is a need, and it's stipulated in the statute, that personal knowledge by the architect or the engineers includes periodic visits. Personal knowledge for the inspector includes continuous inspection at the site, and personal knowledge for the contractor is also defined in the law. This matrix here is intended to give you a snapshot of personal knowledge for construction that happens on site. On-site construction, the personal knowledge with the various players or stakeholders of a project on a typical project. And the key thing here is that you have on-site physical presence that's continuous by the contractor and the IOR, the periodic visits by the designers, the alternates, the OSHPD field staff, and so on. And then reporting by others is also can be gained by the designer, the delegates, the contractor. And some would argue, well, the special inspector is reporting of somebody other than the IOR. But the IOR is required to get his personal knowledge through his own continuous inspection. And whatever the special inspectors are doing is also in addition to that. One of the points we get asked a lot is whether or not the IOR needs to be present when the special inspectors are there. This is intended to make sure it's crystal clear. The IOR must be physically present at the project whenever a special inspector or approved agency is on site performing their duties. Then there's off-site construction, prefabricated or off-site fabrication of components of the building. In this, it's the same type of matrix, identifies where the different stakeholders and how the different stakeholders obtain their personal knowledge, talks about where the off-site physical presence is continuous, that's the approved agency and the special inspector, and then where the reporting of others who were physically present can at the fabrication plant can be used. And you can see on that particular one, the IOR can gain his personal knowledge from the reporting of others for off-site construction. Another important element to off-site construction is the need to be able to verify that the prefabricated work is in compliance with the approved plans once the project is delivered to the site. And the IOR would need to be able to provide that. The TIO should include those procedures that validate the acceptability of the prefabricated systems and components delivered to the on-site location. So I want to go through quickly. I want to walk through and identify just who needs to submit these VCRs. And I'm not going to go through every branch of these several flow charts. I'm going to take you through the most basic ones. So let's say, does the owner need to provide a VCR? If he's owner builder, yes. Does he have personal knowledge? Yes, he does. Then he has to supply a verified compliance report. What if he is not the owner builder? Do you have a general contractor? Well, as long as a DPOR doesn't identify that he needs to be include a VCR, then the owner does not need to provide a verified compliance report. What about the design professional? Well, if he's obtained personal knowledge, and yes, he does have personal knowledge, and then he has to submit a verified compliance report. Well, what if he doesn't have personal knowledge? Maybe he just signed the drawings, but he never goes to the job site because he's running his office, which is pretty common, right? Well, as long as he has a DPOR as an alternate who has that personal knowledge, then the design professional would not have to submit a verified compliance report because he has an alternate who's signing it with the personal knowledge that he needs. What about the alternates? Do they need to submit verified compliance reports? Well, first of all, has the alternate obtained personal knowledge? If yes, then they need to submit a verified compliance report. What if they haven't? Well, the design professional of record instead obtain that personal knowledge. And if the answer is yes, the design professional of record has done it, then no, the alternate does not need to provide a verified compliance report. What about delegates? A delegate could be a building delegate for the structural system or mechanical system. It could be a specialty item like a fire alarm system, fire sprinkler system, something like that. Well, if the delegates obtain personal knowledge, and then they have to submit a verified compliance report. What if they haven't gathered that personal knowledge? Well, the delegate could have an alternate, and that alternate could have that personal knowledge. And if that's the case, then the delegates would not need to submit a verified compliance report because the delegate's alternate would have submitted that. The inspector of record, the next couple are pretty straightforward. Has he obtained personal knowledge? Yes, he has. He needs to submit a verified compliance report. The general contractor, has he obtained personal knowledge? Yes, he has. He needs to submit a verified compliance report. The approved agency or laboratory, have they obtained personal knowledge? Yes, they have. Submit a verified compliance report. The special inspector, probably the most contentious one, because there's some mixed thoughts about there. But this is the answer to this particular question. Is there a special circumstance on the project? If not, is the verified compliance report going to be submitted by the approved agency? If yes, the approved agency, have they got their personal knowledge? If yes, then there is no need for a special inspector to submit the verified compliance report because it would be submitted by the agency. Now I'm going to take you down the other path. Well, what if there is a special circumstance and OSHPD's field office or field staff has asked for a special inspector verified compliance report? The special inspector must have personal knowledge. And then yes, in that case, a special inspector would need to submit a verified compliance report. What about everybody else? Well, this could be a field representative for the designer. It could be a lot of people. It really boils down to whether or not the TIO program designed by the design professional has directed this. If the DPOR directed that a person, a vendor, a supplier, or a subcontractor provides a VCR, then that person needs to have the obtained personal knowledge, and then they would need to submit a verified compliance report. Most cases, that's not required. The designers normally don't specify that, in which case these folks do not need to submit a verified compliance report. Who collects and submits the VCRs to OSHPD? The design professional record is responsible to submit these documents. We suggest you provide this through the uploading functions on our e-service portal, and that's usually the most efficient way to do it. Who keeps those records on site? The inspector of record is responsible to maintain copies of all VCRs on site until the completion of the project. That information needs to be readily available when OSHPD's field staff comes to the project site and requests copies, or at least to look at those documents. And with that, I can take any questions if anybody has any.
Great, thank you, Joe. Great presentation. I'm looking over the list of names here. I don't see any hands raised. So if you'd like to participate in or ask a question, ask Joe a question now. Now is the time to get a direct answer, straight answer. So if you can, go ahead and click that little hand icon next to your name in the go-to panel, and we would be happy to call on you. And we'll go ahead, unmute you, and you can unmute yourself. So Peter, I see you have your hand raised. Thank you for raising your hand. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, so go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Something that comes up from time to time is maybe a critical switchover. Is it acceptable to have design professionals out ahead of that to see the bulk of the work complete, and then say, when the team's out there at 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe they're in communication, they're taking photos of the completed final steps. Would that be adequate for design professionals' personal knowledge?
Yeah. I would say to that, Pete, as I would say, it goes back to the very thing I was kind of knocking the door down with, and that has to do with, that whole thing about reasonable diligence to obtain personal knowledge. If that's if that's happening, then you know, then you know you're fine. If your team is convinced that that's going the way it needs to, then and the design professional of record is on site at, you know, I don't know, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the work's happening at 2 o'clock, and he's coordinating, making sure he's convinced everything's moving the way it needs to, then you ought to be fine.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Alejandra, we see you have your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you'd like to unmute yourself, that'd be great.
Perfect. Thank you. I have a quick question. I have a project that we're actually in the process of closing out. We've been finishing the different increments. It's a 7 increment ground up building. And we're starting to get the letters from OSHPD to upload all our final VCRs. And one example is increment 4, which is just the exterior framing of the building. Our TIO doesn't require a final VCR from the geotech and the civil. They weren't involved in that process. But the letter does ask us to upload a VCR, even though they weren't involved in the exterior framing. I was going to rely on what was requested on the TIO, but I'm curious what the thoughts are.
Well, you know, if the TIO program identifies those individuals as needing to sign a VCR and submit one, and I don't know because I don't have your TIO, but if it says that they are required to, then we're going to ask that you do it.
No, and we actually don't. We actually did not. It wasn't required for that specific increment when I said it's just the exterior.
That's a great question. And because, you know, if there's a designer who has no involvement on some part of the work that's underway or that's been completed, there's no reasonable diligence that says they have personal knowledge about their portion of the work. So no, they don't need to. Perfect. They do not. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you, Alejandra. I want to go ahead and encourage others to go ahead and raise your hand. We like hearing questions and answering those questions. So go ahead and click that little hand icon. Gabe, I see you have your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you can unmute yourself, Gabe.
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Joe, you mentioned the VCRs and project documents being readily available, and in today's computer age, what's considered readily available? Is it paper copies, or does it mean that the field staff have to be able to get into or access electronic documents?
That's a really good question, Gabe, and it's been a topic of discussion among leadership at OSHPD. So, you know, naturally, paper will work almost all the time. If readily available means I can walk over the shelf, pull a folder open up a notebook and point to the document. That's readily available. What's not readily available? Joe, I know you want to see my VCR. I uploaded into some electronic system, whatever that management system is of choice, and I need to go get the person who has those login credentials. It might take 10 minutes, 20 minutes. OSHPD field staff, we don't have time to do that. We don't have time to because we're being asked to go to too many projects to figure out how to navigate through Procore or eBuilder or any of the other many websites and software programs that allow you to do that. If it takes more than just a couple minutes for you to pull it up, then it's not readily available. Now, I've talked to some people who, and I'll use eBuilder, but it could be any of them, who've used eBuilder, who walked away for 20 minutes and came back later and said, okay, I finally got it. That's not readily available. If the IOR is not on site and there's no credentials for that person to be able to get into the system and quickly get that for the field staff, because the field staff was driving by and thought they'd stop by, and that's a bit of a problem. If that, I worked with one IOR on one project where I think they were using, I don't know, one of those file sharing programs, but the person had the tablet, and I said, well, show me this. And they popped right to it. Bang. I mean, we're sitting at a table. There it is, Joe. I said, show me that. And he was able to very quickly get to those documents without me having to know how to use any kind of technology or have any kind of login credentials. So I know that's a little bit long-winded answer, Gabe, but I hope that gives you the thought or the direction you were looking for.
It does. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gabe. And Joe, just so you know, we don't see your presentation on the screen anymore, but I think that's okay, unless we need to refer back to it. But Joanna, I see you have your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you can unmute yourself, Joanna. Joanna, if you're there, you are self-muted.
Can you hear me?
Yep. There you go. Thank you.
I would like to get a copy of your slides
Of course.
presentation.
The presentation is in the go-to panel under the handout section, and it's
Okay.
in PDF format. So feel free to download that while you're on here now. It's a quick download, and it's a very useful tool.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. Peter, we see you have your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I hope I'm not exceeding a one-question limit here. This is great, and I've already downloaded the presentation, and I'll be sharing that. I really appreciate this. But another thing that we run into sometimes gets a little sticky with design professionals not always wanting to come out on smaller projects. And is there an excusable minor in nature project where maybe a design professional can obtain all of their knowledge from discussion IORs and photos and FaceTime and things like that, or is it dead fast that at some point every design professional is listed needs to set foot on the project?
Very good question. Thanks, Pete. And no, you're not over asking questions. The more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. To the answer to your question, the short answer is no. To your question, is there ever a time where they don't have to come to the job site? The statute, that's the laws of California. The statute says there has to be some reasonable diligence to obtain personal knowledge, which includes some site visit. Maybe it's a one quick visit. It can't just be a photo from Pete to the designer that says, hey, there it is. It's anchored. There's too many other pieces of it that need to be looked at, right? You have too many components. There's too much that has to happen. And to be blunt, we don't have the authority at OSHPD to say something other than what the law says. And the law says very clearly in statute that it is a requirement, that a field visit is required at some point.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Pete. Thanks for that question. And thanks everyone who has taken the time to raise their hand and participate in the dialogue. This has been great. We see a couple of more hands. So I saw Mike, you have your hand up. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you can unmute yourself, Mike.
Good afternoon. Thank you. So on the topic of access to required documents by the IOR and the ability to present those timely and quickly to the field staff, I've heard that there have been some field staff that are requesting access to something, a platform such as Procore, eBuilder, or something similar. Is that something that's required by OSHPD?
Mike, are you asking if OSHPD's field staff is entitled to have access to Procore or eBuilder or one of those other systems?
Correct, Joe.
Yeah, no, we're not entitled to that. What we are required to have by code is access to the information, however you want to give it to us.
Okay.
Now, somebody might say, oh, we want you to have a Procore user credentials so that you have a password and you'll have to learn how to use Procore and take a 3-hour tutorial on it. But, we're not doing that, right? That's not reasonable. Reasonable diligence. That's not reasonable for us to go figure out every software under the sun that manages projects. That's not reasonable. Our staff has to go from one job to the next. We need to be able to get there, look at it, make sure it's in order, and move on to the next one. And so, no, you're not required to give them access. You can if you want, but and it's up to them if that's going to be acceptable to them. Perhaps they're an expert in e-builder and, they just love playing around on it and can get around all they want. That's up to them. As far as OSHPD field staff choosing to look at that as a way of getting that personal knowledge or getting that understanding, that's on them. But the project itself there's no obligation on your part to give them that.
Thanks for your clarification, Joe. I appreciate that.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, Mike, for that. Want to go ahead and let you know that we have a little over 4 minutes left here in this conversation. So feel free to raise your hand. And also want to remind everyone, if you don't get a chance to ask a question, or if you think of a question after the presentation is over, feel free to email us at oshpd.fddisu@oshpod.ca.gov. Again, that's oshpod.fddisu@oshpod.ca.gov. And want to go ahead and remind everyone that you're more than welcome to download that handout in the handout section, which is in PDF format, as you can use that as a tool and refer back to it anytime. So I'm looking over the list of names, and I'm also looking at the question box in the go-to panel, and I don't see any more hands or questions typed into that box. So I'll give it a once over and give you an opportunity to go ahead and raise your hand one last time or type that question in. If not, we can go ahead and conclude the presentation. But Timothy, looks like you raised your hand, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you if you can unmute yourself.
All right. Joe, with the advent of the newer technology to allow almost a virtual walk of the job site, would that, in your mind, conclude reasonable diligence for, knowledge? Would be to essentially, there's newer technology that allows a 3D camera such that, say, a contractor could send a personnel around the entire job site to walk, and almost real time design professional can say, okay, stop. Can you go over to this area? Do I see a problem or want to look into this a little bit more? Can you walk closer to this? Would that give a leeway for design professionals that may not have time or access for smaller projects, possibly due to budget, is why I'm thinking they're not wanting to show up? Is that something that would be acceptable?
The short answer is no. The short answer is no. The longer answer is that the design professionals can receive part of their personal knowledge through the reporting of others, and through mechanisms like what you described, 3D cameras and other technology. But it does not, it's more of an augmentation of how they gain personal knowledge, which includes some reasonable diligence for a site visit or gaining of that personal knowledge. But in the statute, it uses the words periodic visits to the job site. So we can't let technology be a replacement for them going to the job site, or anyone for that matter.
More of a supplement then, just not a replacement.
It is a supplement, absolutely. And we would fully expect that all of us would be using technology to the fullest extent to supplement our knowledge and our understanding of those projects, right? That's essential. Especially in the way the world is changing with technology, I think it's a major component to how we should be operating. But again, like you said, it's more of an augmentation of what they're doing, not a replacement of what they're doing.
Great question, Timothy. That's awesome. Want to go ahead and let everyone know that we are 30 minutes past the hour and our time is up. So if you have a question that comes up after we hang up and end this presentation, send us an email. We'll be glad to take a look at it, review it, provide a good answer for you that you can use out in the field as you progress through these projects. So also want to remind you that we do have more FBA 10s or Field Brief Advice 10s coming up, which we're going to go over IORs, Inspect to Pass, the TIO program, and how to fill it out, and other great topics. So if you haven't done so already, feel free to register for those. And you can also sign up for OSHPD mail server notifications by going to our website at www.oshpd.ca.gov, going to the upper right-hand corner of that page, clicking subscribe, providing your essential information such as your name, email address, and clicking as to what you would like to receive notifications for, whether it's building safety and financing, design and construction, and other awesome topics. So with that being said, until next time, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for doing your part in providing access to safe, quality healthcare environments throughout California. Have a good day.